My name is Julia, and I've been working as a babysitter for a few years now. I've had strange jobs before. Some families were awkward, some houses felt cold, but nothing ever made me feel genuinely unsafe. That changed the night I accepted a last-minute job through an app I often used. The pay was unusually high, and the location was in a quiet, distant suburb. I felt a bit uneasy, but I ignored it. Money was tight, and it was only one night. When I arrived, a couple greeted me at the door. They introduced themselves as Claudia and Marcus. They were unnervingly polite. Their smiles stretched a little too wide. Their movements seemed overly rehearsed. Something about them felt artificial, like they had practiced how to act normal and were still getting it wrong. Standing behind them was a young boy, maybe 9 or 10, who looked pale and silent. He didn't say a word and barely moved. They told me his name was Tobias and handed me a typed sheet of instructions. Food, allergies, bedtime, all very standard. But when I asked, "So when are you heading out?" they exchanged a glance before Claudia replied, "Oh, we are not leaving, dear. We just need some quiet time downstairs. You two will have the upstairs to yourselves." I forced a smile, though the situation made me feel uncomfortable. I figured maybe they were just eccentric, and I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. I followed Tobias upstairs. Tobias walked slowly, as if afraid to lead the way. His room was spotless, sterile, almost like no child had actually lived there. The bed was made too tightly. The boys were either missing or placed with unnatural precision, and there was no television. I sat on a chair and tried to get him to talk, suggesting cartoons or asking about his favorite shows. He said nothing and just stared at the door. His eyes didn't blink much, and his expression never changed. I kept trying to make small talk, telling him about my day, about my cat, about school, anything to get him to respond. He barely moved, but after nearly an hour, he looked at me and whispered, "They are not my real parents." I blinked, not sure I'd heard him right. He repeated it, still in a whisper. "They told me they keep people. You're one of them now." My stomach tightened. I wanted to believe he was playing a game or making something up, but there was no humor in his voice, no smile, no blinking, just fear. I stood up and ran to the door. I turned the handle, but it wouldn't move. Locked. I began banging on it, calling out for Claudia and Marcus. I yelled that the door was stuck and demanded that they open it. When they finally opened the door, they both stood there, smiling as usual, unaffected. "Is something wrong?" I looked at Tobias, then back at them. "He says you're not his parents." Claudia's smile didn't fade. "And you believed him?" "We locked the door, dear, in case he has a panic attack and tries to run outside. He sometimes does." I told them I didn't feel safe and wanted to leave. Claudia's eyes softened, but her tone was patronizing. "Julia, everything's fine. You're just overwhelmed, dear." That was the moment she pulled a kitchen knife from behind her back. She didn't threaten me with it, but the message was clear. "We'd be grateful if you could stay with Tobias just a little longer." My hands started shaking. I backed away slowly while Marcus casually stepped forward and closed the door again, locking it with a loud click. That sound sent a chill down my spine. I rushed to the window and tried to open it, but it was sealed shut. That's when I noticed the metal bars on the outside. Thick, permanent bars. This wasn't a job anymore. I wasn't working. I was locked inside. A prisoner. I sat down, tried to call someone, but there was no signal. No Wi-Fi, not even a fake emergency line. I turned to Tobias. "Why are they doing this?"
"They like keeping people. They say it's for company, but
Sometimes it gets worse. Sometimes they give me things that make me sleep. I stopped counting a long time ago. The panic hit me in waves. I tried to calm myself, but my breathing was shallow, my skin cold. I remembered I hadn't told anyone where I was going. No one would come looking. I started pacing the room, touching the walls, looking for any way out. There was nothing, just the locked door, barred window, and Tobias, quiet, motionless, watching me as if he already knew how it would end. And after what felt like hours, I found a small metal nail clipper in my backpack. It was the only sharp object I had. I held it in my hand, testing how hard I could press it against my skin. It wouldn't do much damage, but it was better than nothing. I hid it up my sleeve and waited. Eventually, the lock clicked and the door opened. Claudia stepped in with a tray of food and a glass of juice. Her voice was sweet. "You're doing such a great job, dear. We'll need you a bit longer." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to Tobias, grabbed him quickly, and pressed the clipper to his neck. "Let me out or I'll hurt him." My grip was weak and my voice cracked, but I hoped fear would be enough. Tobias began to cry, shaking in my arms. Claudia's face didn't change. She gently set the tray down. Marcus entered the room with a calm smile. "That's not the way to solve things." They both stepped closer. I panicked and shoved Tobias aside, running toward the door, but Marcus caught me mid-step and threw me against the wall. The pain shot through my shoulder. Claudia picked up the clipper and stabbed it into my back. I screamed. They dragged me to my knees. Claudia whispered in my ear, "We have rules here, Julia. You broke them." She yanked my hair and forced me to look at Tobias. "Apologize." I'm sorry." Marcus nodded in approval. He grabbed me by the arm and dragged me down the hallway. He opened a hidden door behind a bookshelf. A staircase led into darkness. He pushed me down without hesitation. I hit the stairs hard, rolling until I crashed against the concrete floor. My ribs ached. The basement smelled like mold, metal, and something far worse. Decay. It was pitch black, but I could make out shapes. In one corner, 2 women were chained to the wall. One was motionless. The other stared at me with hollow eyes, thin and barely alive. I crawled closer, trying not to startle her. She recoiled, clutching the chain as if I was another threat. Her skin was pale, her arms covered in faded scars. I whispered, "Are you all right?" But she didn't respond. I realized she hadn't spoken in days or weeks, maybe months. The other body didn't move at all. Her mouth was open, her limbs stiff. She had been dead for some time. I found a corner and sat there, shaking. I tried to stay awake, counting seconds, reciting songs in my head. I spoke to myself to hold on to reality. The woman nearby mumbled nonsense at night. One evening, Claudia came down and gave her a flower. "You're still my favorite, dear," she whispered. That same night, the woman passed away quietly. I think she gave up on life. I was next. I could feel my body shutting down. My stomach hurt constantly, and I barely had the strength to sit up. Then one night, I heard a loud banging upstairs. Running, shouting, a crash. Marcus stormed into the basement with a gun in his hand. He looked terrified. "Don't speak!" he shouted to no one. He rushed back up the stairs. I heard more noise, then I heard a voice I'd never heard before. "Police! If anyone is down there, say something!" I screamed so loudly my throat burned. A flashlight beam hit my face. Boots hit the stairs fast. "She's alive!" someone shouted. A pair of hands grabbed me, cutting the chain. I collapsed into the officer's arms. I was too weak to stand, too numb to speak. They carried me outside and into an ambulance. The air felt unreal. The cold night wind stung my face. I saw lights, people, flashing sirens. A medic asked me questions, but I couldn't answer. I just stared at the trees, blinking slowly, feeling like I was in a dream. At the hospital, they cleaned my wounds, fed me, treated the infections. A detective came by later. He told me Tobias had escaped while Claudia and Marcus slept. He found a loose vent and crawled through it, running barefoot through the woods until he reached a gas station. He told the cashier everything. The police didn't believe him at first, but then he showed them the bruises. That child saved my life. Even after everything, he was brave enough to do what I couldn't. He never screamed. He never ran while I was there. He waited. He watched. And he acted when he had the chance. Claudia was wounded during the rescue but survived long enough to confess everything. She and Marcus had abducted at least 6 women over the years. Some were babysitters. Others were just strangers. 3 bodies were confirmed. 2 were never found. Marcus now faces trial, though I stopped following the updates. I don't want to know anything more. I spent weeks in the hospital. Recovery was slow. I still can't sleep with the lights off. I still check every lock twice. Sometimes in my dreams I see Claudia's face smiling at me, holding that same flower. I wake up screaming. I don't go near unfamiliar houses anymore. I don't accept babysitting jobs. Tobias was placed with a new family. I saw him once, at a distance. He was smiling. For a moment, I smiled too.
My name is Owen. This happened when I was 13, the kind of age where you think you're old enough to see things clearly but still miss the obvious. My brother Theo had just turned 8, and our parents weren't around much during the week. They hired a babysitter to look after us, someone cheap and local. Her name was Rachel. At first glance, she was harmless. Young, always with clean clothes, polite enough, never raised her voice or looked annoyed. I thought she was cool. Gave me space, never bugged me about brushing my teeth or going to bed. I figured I got lucky. Theo didn't see it that way. From the very beginning, he acted weird when she was around. Quiet, stiff, and angry in a way that didn't fit his age. He'd barely speak when she was in the room and would just stare at her with this hard look, like he was forcing himself not to cry or scream. I asked him a couple of times what his deal was, and all he ever said was that she was bad. No explanation, no stories, just that single word. Eventually, I got tired of it. I started thinking he just wanted attention or didn't like sharing the house with someone new. He was the kind of kid who still needed help with the TV remote, so the idea of him picking up on something I couldn't annoyed me. We fought a lot those weeks, and every time Rachel came over, we were more distant. I kept telling myself he'd grow out of it. Looking back now, that was the first of many things I got dead wrong. It was a Thursday. Our parents had a work dinner on the other side of town and wouldn't be back until late. Rachel showed up at 5 like usual. She brought snacks, smiled at my mom, petted our dog on the head, and said all the right things before the front door closed and we were alone. I was already halfway into a stream in my room when she knocked and leaned in. "I'm gonna help Theo get his bath started. Just chill in here, all right?" She said it with that overly cheerful tone she always used with me, like she thought I was some toddler she had to babysit too. I waved her off and turned back to my screen. Nothing seemed off. Nothing ever did at the start. 10, maybe 15 minutes passed. I got up to grab a drink and noticed the hallway was foggy, like someone had left the shower running for too long. There was also a towel sitting near the laundry basket. I figured they forgot to bring one in, so I grabbed it and started heading to the bathroom. The moment I got closer, I stopped walking. There was no sound coming from inside, no running water, no talking, Not even Theo's usual whining when he had to wash his hair. The light was on under the door, but it was too quiet. I stood there holding the towel, suddenly unsure if I should knock or not. I pressed my ear to the door. Still nothing. My stomach twisted. I turned the doorknob slowly and pushed it open. Steam rolled out instantly, hot and suffocating, and I stepped into a bathroom that felt like a boiler room. The mirror was completely fogged, the air was thick, and I could barely see past a couple feet in. At first I thought the water must have been running forever, but then I heard something. A splash. Small, too small for a tub. As I moved closer, the fog began to part, and what I saw made my brain stall. Rachel was crouched on the tile floor, her knees dug in, holding Theo by the back of the neck with one hand and forcing his face toward a plastic bucket full of steaming water with the other. His legs were kicking weakly, his hands trying to push against her wrist, but she had him in place like he weighed nothing. The bucket was wobbling from his struggle. I stood there frozen for a second too long before shouting her name. Her head snapped around like she was pulled by a string. Her expression didn't even try to look normal. Her eyes were too wide, her mouth twisted into something between a snarl and a grin. "I told you to stay in your room." Her voice was raw and bitter, but the worst part was how calm she sounded underneath it, like she wasn't even surprised she got caught. I tried to grab Theo's arm to pull him away, but Rachel shoved me with one arm, hard enough to knock me against the wall. The towel hit the floor, forgotten. Theo scrambled into the corner, coughing and crying, trying to hide behind the toilet. She stood up slowly, one hand still wet from the bucket, and turned to face me. "You know what pisses me off the most about him? His name. Theo. Same as that useless piece of garbage I used to date. You know what it's like to hear that name over and over? It's like a fire alarm in my skull. Every time he opens his mouth, I want to rip it off his face." I started yelling, screaming that I was going to call my parents, the cops, anyone. Her eyes didn't blink once. "Oh, go ahead. Use the phone. Do it. You think they'll believe you? They trust me more than their own kids." Then she stepped forward again, fast. I turned and ran. I ran straight to the living room, skidding over the hardwood, nearly smashing into the coffee table. I grabbed the cordless phone, but the screen was black. No battery. I bolted toward the front door, but the deadbolt was locked and the key was missing. Before I could even start yelling for Theo to run, I felt her fingers twist into the back of my shirt. She yanked me away from the door like I was nothing, spinning me and slamming me against the wall. Her breath was hot and smelled like burnt sugar and chemicals. She didn't say a word, just stared at me with this look like she wanted to dissect me. Her eyes flicked toward the stairs, then back at me. I tried to knee her in the stomach, but she moved like she'd done this before. She twisted me sideways and shoved me again. My ribs smacked the banister. Before she could grab me again, Theo came out of nowhere, barefoot and wild-eyed. He threw himself at her leg and bit into it with everything he had. Rachel screamed. Not in pain, in pure rage. She kicked him off and grabbed her leg, stumbling back, and that gave me the chance to pull Theo up and drag him toward the stairs. We climbed 2 steps at a time, hearing her stumbling after us, muttering something that didn't make sense. "Should have boiled him the first week, should have done it while he was asleep, little noise box, always whining, always looking at me like that." I didn't stop until we were in the upstairs bathroom. I locked the door, yanked the key out of the lock, and backed up. Theo was sobbing again, holding his shoulder. I grabbed him by the arms and tried to keep him quiet, even though I was shaking worse than he was. We could hear her downstairs. Her footsteps were uneven, quick and heavy, like she was pacing back and forth. Then they stopped, and for a minute, everything was silent. Theo whispered something. I leaned in closer. "She always does this, when you're not around." "What do you mean?" "She holds my head in the sink, with both hands. Says if I scream, she'll do it to you too. Says if I tell, she'll break our legs and say we fell." My jaw clenched. I wanted to throw up, scream, hit something, but I couldn't make a sound. The doorknob rattled once, then again. Then the pounding started. She didn't speak at first, just slammed her fist over and over. Then came the voice like she was whispering and shouting at the same time. "You little rats! Open the door! You think this is over? You think a door's gonna stop me?" She kicked it again. Then again. The lock groaned. "You'll be quiet forever once I'm done with you." We pulled the cabinet in front of the door. We sat in the bathtub with the curtain drawn, holding each other and shaking while she kept pounding. For 20 minutes, it felt like hell was on the other side of that door. Then she stopped. When the front door finally opened and we heard our parents' voices, I didn't waste a second. I unlocked the bathroom and dragged Theo down the stairs with me, screaming for help. We threw ourselves into their arms, both of us crying and yelling at the same time. My dad looked at us like we were speaking another language. From behind him, Rachel stepped into view. "Is everything all right? They've been acting really weird, locked themselves in the bathroom and wouldn't come out." My mom turned to me looking more confused than worried. We tried explaining. We told them everything. Rachel stood calmly behind them, her hands folded, still smiling like this was all a joke. When I pointed at the bucket upstairs, she tilted her head. "They're just being dramatic. Maybe I let the water get too hot. I was trying to help him wash his hair. He slipped, that's all." And they bought it. My dad grounded us both. My mom apologized to Rachel. Rachel shrugged and said maybe she should stop babysitting, that it was better for everyone. She left without a scratch, without a single mark on her record. Later that week, Theo told me everything. That she used to hold his hand against the stove when I wasn't around. That she would whisper in his ear at night and say she'd break our dog's neck if he told anyone. That she once made him eat soap. I sat on the floor of our room, hands on my knees, feeling like the dumbest, most useless brother alive. We never told anyone else. We tried. They didn't listen. Rachel still lives nearby. She walks past our house sometimes, especially when our parents aren't home. Every time she sees us, she stops and waves. Big, fake, cheerful grin, like she's proud of what she got away with. And you know, she did. I didn't ask too many questions. The parents needed someone for the weekend. I needed rent money. 3 kids, big house, middle of nowhere. Sounded boring. I got there Friday afternoon. The mom walked me through the usual stuff. Bedtimes, allergies, alarms. The dad barely looked at me. As soon as they left, the house felt off. Not haunted, not cursed, just off, like it wasn't meant to be lived in. The place was spotless, but not lived in. Everything felt positioned, not placed. The lights were too dim even when they were on. The walls were bare except for a single photo in the hall, a man and a kid, both blurred like the camera didn't want to remember them. I noticed it, then forgot it just as fast. I tried to focus on the kids. Mason was 6, quiet, looked over his shoulder a lot. Ellie was 8, serious and stiff like she was stuck in a game she didn't want to play. Noah was 10 and polite in a way that didn't feel normal. Too rehearsed. He told me which doors not to open, which lights not to turn off. I said okay, didn't plan on testing it. They warned me about the attic and the crawl space under the stairs. Mason whispered to never talk to the man if I saw him. I thought it was part of some weird game, something they made up to pass the time. But it wasn't a game. Friday night I put them to bed and crashed on the couch with my phone. Around 11:30, I heard a faint sound upstairs. Not walking, not footsteps. Scraping. Slow and steady, like nails on wood. I muted the TV and sat up. The noise came again, from inside the house. I waited, but nothing followed. Just silence. I checked the hallway, listened by the stairs. Still nothing. The next morning, Mason looked like he hadn't slept. I asked him if something was wrong. He said he saw someone crawling out from under his bed, just looking at him. I asked if it was a dream. He shook his head. Ellie looked at me and said flatly, "He doesn't like being seen." He? I didn't ask. I just got them breakfast, kept things moving. That night, the scratching came back, louder this time. It started under the guest bed where I was trying to sleep, then moved along the floor, under the walls, into the hallway. I followed the sound, phone light in hand. I got to the stairs and stopped. It felt like if I took one more step up, something would grab me by the ankle and pull me down. I turned back, slept on the floor near the kids. Sunday started wrong. Mason was screaming. I ran upstairs, threw his door open, and found him under the desk holding his foot. The bed was flipped over, his blanket torn. He kept saying the same thing again and again. "He touched me! He grabbed my leg!" The room smelled sour, like mold and dirt. I lifted the mattress and found scratches on the floorboards underneath. Deep, uneven lines. Too long for a kid's fingers. I followed them to the wall where the floor met the baseboard. The wood there was split open. Someone had pried it loose. There was a dark gap underneath, maybe 2 feet deep. I couldn't see the bottom. I got on my stomach and looked into the hole. At first it was just darkness, but then something moved. I couldn't see a face, just fingers retreating into the dark. Thin, gray, and dirty. They moved with purpose, like they knew I was watching. I scrambled back and pulled the bed frame in front of the hole. I tried to tell myself it was rats, but rats don't drag beds. They don't grab ankles. The rest of the house was silent. I checked all the locks, windows, nothing broken, no signs of forced entry. I called the parents, but no one answered. I tried 911. Line dead. I felt like the walls were closing in. The air wasn't thicker, it was emptier. Like something had taken all the normal out of the place and replaced it with nothing. I told the kids we were camping in the living room. They didn't argue. Mason didn't talk at all. Ellie stared at the ceiling. Noah kept glancing at the hallway like he was counting seconds. We laid out sleeping bags, turned on every light in the room, and pretended it was a fun game. It wasn't. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps above us. Slow, steady, dragging one foot. They crossed the hallway, paused, then came down 2 stairs. Then stopped. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Again, I unplugged the landline. It had no dial tone. I checked the front door. Locked from the inside, but when I tried to turn the bolt, it didn't move. I tried the back door. Same thing. Every exit felt sealed. Then something slammed into the wall. Not a knock, a full hit like a body thrown into it. We all jumped. The kids were holding on to each other now. Mason was crying silently, face buried into Ellie's side. I turned toward the sound and saw the basement door creaking open. I didn't open it. I hadn't touched it. It just moved on its own, from the inside. I stepped into the kitchen. The door was wide now. The basement stairs were pitch black, the kind of black that eats your light. I aimed my phone flashlight down, and it didn't reach the bottom. I couldn't see how deep it went. Then something moved on the 4th step from the top. Fast, like an arm pulling back. I shoved a chair under the knob and ran back to the kids. The living room light flickered hard and died. All of them. We sat in the dark with just my phone's light. We didn't talk, we didn't breathe, and then we heard it. Someone climbing out. Slow, deliberate. A foot hit the kitchen floor. Then another. Then the dragging started again. I grabbed the kids and ran upstairs. My legs were shaking, but I kept moving. Picked the nearest bedroom and slammed the door. Locked it. There was barely enough light to see. We backed up to the window. I tried to open it, but it was sealed shut. Not jammed. Screwed in. Who the hell screws a bedroom window shut? Then the doorknob rattled. Once. Twice. Slow and calm, like whoever was on the other side wasn't in a hurry. I backed up and held the kids behind me. The knob started moving, but we could hear breathing. Not heavy, but close. Wet. Then a knock. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. Minutes passed, or maybe an hour. Then the sound started again. Under the bed. Not above, not behind, right underneath us. I didn't want to look, but I had to. I crouched slowly, raised the bed skirt. A face stared back. Pale, sunken eyes, no hair, teeth too wide for his mouth. He didn't move, just smiled, then slid backward like he was being pulled by something. I grabbed the dresser and shoved it against the bed. Mason started crying again. Ellie whispered that he wasn't supposed to show his face, that if we saw him, he'd be angry. I asked what that meant. She just said, "Now he'll stay longer." We stayed there until morning light started coming in through the blinds. No more knocks, no more steps, just quiet. That kind of quiet that feels fake, like it's watching you. The parents got home just after sunrise. They walked in calm like nothing had happened. I told them everything. The hole, the basement, the man. The dad didn't flinch. He looked tired. The mom held Mason and whispered that it was over now. I didn't believe her. Police showed up an hour later. One officer opened the crawl space under Mason's room and started screaming. He crawled back out, bleeding from the arm. They pulled out a man. Thin, filthy, eyes wide and unblinking. He didn't resist, he just kept staring at the hallway, at the walls, at me. They said his name was Martin, used to live there, had a restraining order. They think he never left, that he crawled in through the floor years ago and never came back out, that he lived under the house, watching, moving from room to room in the crawl spaces, coming out at night, crawling back before sunrise. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just smiled when they cuffed him and walked him out of the house. I quit babysitting, changed my number, blocked their calls, but last week I saw Mason again, outside a store. He smiled and waved. I walked over, asked how things were. "He still knocks sometimes. 3 times, just like before. But now we don't look." He ran back to his mom. I stood there trying not to throw up. I know that he was arrested and the kids are probably imagining things, but the idea of them being this scared breaks my heart.